I often tell my Western Civ students that if there's one year that they should memorize in the history of the Western world, maybe, just maybe, it should be 1453. 1453, the year of the fall of Constantinople, the fall of the Roman Empire, finally, the Byzantine Empire, after so many centuries. This fall, of course, all the years that led up to it and the years after it, led to the migration of many Byzantine scholars. These are repositories of ancient and medieval wisdom and language and knowledge, and they're migrating to Europe, and they're settling in places like Italy, where they contribute probably critically to the Renaissance and to Renaissance ideas like humanism, thus everything that stems from humanism. And though other Europeans, in particular Portugal, the Portuguese have been exploring the African coastline, a whole generation or more before the fall of Constantinople, mostly looking for gold, it's the establishment of that very militaristic Ottoman presence there on the western terminus of the Silk Road, the disruption of all that trade, the rise in the prices of luxury goods like silk and especially spices, that motivates sort of a need to find alternate trade routes, alternate routes to Asia. Of course, these routes end up being dominated by Europeans. The Portuguese go east around Africa, the Spanish go west towards the Americas, and then other Europeans follow, and you know the rest. The fall of Constantinople, or at least the years-long historical processes connected to the fall of Constantinople, ushers in a new age. This is the dawn, potentially, of modern history itself. A decade before the fall of Constantinople, its ultimate demise is still anything but certain, and might have been prevented entirely right here at Varna in modern-day Bulgaria. See, if you go back to the 1400s, the Ottoman state had suffered a debilitating loss at the hands of Timur the Lame, or Tamerlane. But the Ottomans had recovered after a few years of serious instability. The Ottomans were back on the warpath. They're expanding in the Aegean Sea. They're expanding in the Black Sea. They're marching right up to the walls of Constantinople itself in 1422. Their fifth siege of that city, by the way. And though the 1422 siege would fail also, it's indicative of the fact that the Ottomans were anything but done. They're expanding into the Balkans and consolidating their power there. They're battling the Venetians in the Eastern Mediterranean. Everyone knows a showdown is coming. Without some sort of united front by the various Christian states of Europe, the Ottomans seemed poised not just to take down ancient Constantinople, which is unthinkable, but to make a push into Central Europe and even into Western Europe. The very real specter of an invincible and unstoppable, Muslim tide hangs over the various popes and potentates of Europe. And many are eager for a crusade, a great and final crusade to settle the matter once and for all. The problem is, who's going to lead it? Who's going to fight the Ottomans? Who can stand up to them? Well, this brings us to the Hungarian general, János Hunyadi, who seems uniquely able to put up a fight against the Ottomans. He's battling them with quite a bit of success in Wallachia. He's battling them, along the borderlands of Hungary. He's breaking their power or weakening their power in the Balkans generally, in Serbia, in Albania, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, here in Bulgaria. And understand how atypical victories like Hunyadi's were during this time period. It awakened in the hearts of many, it seems, in Europe at the time, a sense of hope. Maybe now was the moment. Even the Sultan, the Ottoman Sultan, Murad II, sued for peace, and a 10-year truce commenced. Now, the truce wasn't to last very long. The Pope, Eugene IV, seized the moment and announced officially yet another crusade. The showdown had arrived. Thus, when the Sultan, the Ottoman Sultan, tried to cross the straits from Anatolia into Europe with his army, a Venetian fleet was there waiting for him. See, the idea was this. The Venetian fleet would guard the straits, keep watch, and make sure the Sultan's army never got across. Meanwhile, a joint force led by the very young Polish-Hungarian king Władysław, together with János Hunyadi and his forces and others, would battle their way south of the Danube River, all the way here to Varna, pushing the Turks back the entire time. Here they'd hitch a ride on a papal fleet down to Constantinople, again, pushing the Turks back all along the way. So that was the idea. So there the Venetians were, watching and guarding the straits with the help of a papal fleet to boot. Well, that was the plan, anyway. And the first part of it actually did work. János Hunyadi and company, this coalition Christian force, did indeed make its way south of the Danube and began to, battle a path towards Varna. But the Venetians failed on their part of the plan. Supposed to guard the straits, supposed to prevent a crossing. It didn't happen. And here's where the complexities of history come in, as they always do. Looking at this thing as a Christian versus Muslim affair, obviously there's a lot of truth in that, but it is an oversimplification. So for example, how did Sultan Murad II cross into Europe? With the help of the Genoese. The Genoans had sold him transport ships, or at least rented transport ships, to the Ottoman army, and had set up artillery on both sides of the straits, thus negating any advantage of having a Venetian fleet there. And so just like that, Sultan Murad II, who'd been called out of retirement to invade Europe one last time, stood on European soil with a sizable army poised to make his march towards Varna. Thus, events led here to Varna, where a Christian coalition camped across from the Sultan's massive army in preparation for the Great Showdown. And this really was a hodgepodge of Central and Eastern European peoples in this coalition, these troops. And you had Władysław, the Hungarian Polish king, Polish guy. János Hunyadi, of course, Hungarian, Wallachian. You've got Wallachian troops, Hungarian troops, Poles, Czechs, other Bohemians. You've got Lithuanians, you've got Croatians, you've got Bosnians, you've got Bulgarians. You even have some Armenian warriors. You have Teutonic knights and people from various German states. You've got papal knights. Even the brother of the future Vlad the Impaler from Transylvania, future Dracula, his brother was here commanding a contingent of troops. So this really was a true hodgepodge, a true mix. And altogether, there were something like 20,000 to 25,000 of these troops, outnumbered 3-1. Now, before the battle commenced, the Europeans found themselves really hemmed in, stuck there between the Black Sea on one side and the Ottomans' massive army on the other. You've got the highlands to the north, you've got Lake Varna to the south, so they really are hemmed in. And there are those among the Crusaders who are intent on, fortifying a defensive position and sticking to that. But Hunyadi overturned them. See, he saw the futility of the situation and was determined to fight as bravely and fiercely as possible and see where things ended up. Now, when the fighting began, it sort of went back and forth for a while until János Hunyadi's forces were able to break the Ottoman cavalry. Things were looking up for just a second. And then the young Polish king, Władysław, who had been told to wait by János Hunyadi, but was eager to take down the Sultan himself, charged with his cavalry, very critical Polish cavalry, by the way, right into the heart of the Ottoman army, right into the heart of their position. Now, by all accounts, he made it far. He was killed right in front of the Sultan's very tent. In fact, Sultan Murad II's position is right here. He set himself up on this hill so he could command his troops from here. So this is where Władysław charged, and he almost made it. But the move, though brave, turned out to be disastrous for the Crusader army. The Polish cavalry were destroyed. János Hunyadi was left trying to organize a chaotic retreat, which failed too, and the Ottoman army was able ultimately to more or less wipe out the Crusader army. Those who survived were enslaved, and very, very few made it out of Varna, though Hunyadi was one of them. Now, János Hunyadi tried to recover the fallen Polish king's body, but he never could. In fact, it's never been found, though the Polish king's head, Władysław's head, was cut off and taken back to the court as a trophy. The Ottoman victory here at Varna came with a great price for the Ottomans. The Sultan lost so many men fighting the Crusader army that when the battle was over, he wasn't even sure if he'd won it all. But in any case, the Crusader army was destroyed, and with it were dashed the hopes of many European Christians, hopes of either driving the Turks out of Europe or saving Constantinople at all from what seemed more and more likely to be an inevitable fate. Now, János Hunyadi, of course, lived to fight another day, in particular at the Second Battle of Kosovo-Polia in 1448. But after Varna, it was no use. The Ottomans were able to expand and consolidate their positions in the Balkans, surrounding Constantinople and setting the stage 9 years after Varna for the fall of that great ancient city and the ushering in, perhaps, of modern history.